The topic is History of Map Making. Dear students, in this episode, we are going to discuss the history of map making. This episode consists of the following sub-modules. Introduction, the Greek influence, Eratosthenes, the Roman influence, the Middle Ages from 400 BC to 1450 BC, the Dark Ages from 800 BC to 1350 BC, early navigation, Christopher Columbus, Ferdinand Magellan, Gerardus Mercator, the modern atlas, the birth of modern mapmaking and surveying, geographic information systems, the future of mapmaking. Introduction. Maps have been used for thousands of years to help people get from one place to another. They illustrate features in the landscape in order to guide us to our destination. Today, we largely take them for granted and expect them to be easily available in one form or another. Maps are a snapshot in time and therefore provide a fascinating image of the past, both in terms of what was physically present on the ground, such as settlements and roads, and in terms of the philosophies of mapmakers, such as the belief that the world was flat. The Greek influence. It all started in the earliest civilizations of Mesopotamia and China. The Greeks and Romans advanced the science of mapmaking, and it was the Europeans from the 15th to the 17th centuries who really drove its development. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the Western world has been at the forefront of new mapping techniques and innovations. Mapmaking developed significantly with the ancient Greeks. The map drawn by Hecataeus in the 6th century BC shows the world as an island with Greece at its center. However, by the time of Aristotle, around 350 BC, the spherical Earth concept was accepted by all. Ptolemy was the first to illustrate the Earth as being spherical in his world map, which covered the old world from latitudes of about 60 degrees north to 30 degrees south. He projected the spherical Earth onto flat paper for the first time. At the same time, other cultures in the world were developing maps. For instance, in China, they were being carved on wooden plates from around 240 BC onwards. The first known map was created in 2300 BC by the Babylonians, living in what is now modern-day Iraq, and was scratched on a clay tablet. This map shows a representation of the world. By 500 BC, Greece was the center of scientific study and learning in the ancient world. Most people at that time thought that the earth was flat. The Greeks, however, described a round earth. While the idea of a spherical earth was postulated by previous Greek philosophers, including Pythagoras, Aristotle, who lived between 384 BC and 322 BC, proves that the earth is spherical with the following evidence. Lunar eclipse makes a circular shadow on the moon. Ships sink on the horizon. Some stars can be seen from some locations of the earth, but not from others. Eratosthenes, from 276 BC to 194 BC. The first contributions to the science of cartography were the ancient Greeks. Greeks used logic and trigonometry to solve many early questions, such as the shape of the earth. The circumference of the earth was calculated by Eratosthenes, who measured the difference in angle between the solstice sun being vertical at Syene and 7.2 degrees off vertical at Alexandria, or 1/50th of 360 degrees. This distance was approximately 500 miles and was extrapolated to create 50 by 500 miles, which is very close to the actual figure. The Roman influence, medieval and Renaissance mapmaking. There is a long gap in our knowledge about the development of maps from the 2nd century AD until the medieval period. By this time, most world maps were dominated by religious views, and while the Church of Rome was the driving force behind map making, Jerusalem was the center of the known world, reflecting the religious doctrines of 14th century Europe. The Hereford Mappa Mundi, dating from 1300 BC, is typical of this type of European map, showing Jerusalem at the center and the east to the top. Ptolemy was the most important cartographer during the time of the Roman Empire. He revolutionized the depiction of the spherical Earth on a map and suggested precise methods for fixing the position of geographic features on its surface using a coordinate system with parallels of latitude and meridians of longitude. Ptolemy's 8-volume atlas, Geographia or Geography, is a prototype of modern mapping. It included an index of place names with the latitude and longitude of each place to guide the search, scale, conventional signs with legends, and the practice of orienting maps so that north is at the top and east to the right of the map, a universal custom even to this day. In this work, he used information first presented by the Greeks and was the first to come up with what are known as projections. Although Ptolemy's maps were incredible for the time, his maps were very inaccurate. The Middle Ages, 400 BC to 1450 BC. During the Middle Ages, scientific learning became less important than religion. The center of Christian faith was Jerusalem, and that city often occupied the center of a world map. Maps were wonderfully colored and decorated with fanciful animals and people. Two very useful maps were invented and produced during this time. Road maps showing the route to holy places. Portolan maps, that is, maps for navigators. During the medieval period, European maps were dominated by religious views. The TO map was common. In this map format, Jerusalem was depicted at the center and east was oriented towards the top of the map. All maps were, of course, drawn and illuminated by hand, which made the distribution of maps extremely limited. Dark Ages, from 800 BC to 1450 BC. The Dark Ages in Europe followed the collapse of the Roman Empire and the decline of Western civilization, the rise of Christianity, but more directly the decline of the sciences. The lamp of scientific knowledge was obscured by the light of religious ecstasy. Knowledge and maps resided in the hands of religious scribes who tended to support references in the Bible rather than depicting actual geographic facts and supporting the idea of a flat earth. Early navigation. As the Middle Ages came to a close, Ptolemy's maps drew a sense of curiosity to the people of Europe and prompted new exploration. As a result, the explorations of two navigators changed the world forever. Christopher Columbus. Historic voyage in 1492 BC led to chart a western trade route to Asia from Spain. Columbus used Ptolemy's inaccurate maps to cross what was then thought to be a small ocean, and as we know, he never found Asia. Instead, he ran into what is now known as the Americas. The maps that were created from his voyages changed the world forever. The invention of printing made maps much more widely available, beginning in the 15th century. Maps were at first printed using carved wooden blocks. Among the most important map makers of this period was Sebastian Münster in Basel, now in Switzerland. His Geographia, published in 1540, became the new global standard for maps of the world. Ferdinand Magellan. In 1519, Magellan was sent by Spain to once again find a trade route to Asia. This time, they were searching for a way through the Americas. As he found out, there is no way through the continents of North and South America. Magellan sailed to and around the tip of modern-day South America to reach Asia. After finally reaching modern-day Philippines, he was killed by natives. Magellan's work will forever be remembered because he was the first man to circumnavigate the planet. Gerardus Mercator. Gerardus Mercator was a Belgian and the leading geographer and cartographer of the mid-16th century. He developed the cylindrical Mercator projection in 1569 that most mapmakers still base map projections on even to this day. No flat map can keep size as well as shape correct for a spherical Earth, and the Mercator projection stretches the poles to the same width as the equator. This results in Iceland appearing to be the same size as Kenya, when it is in fact 5 times smaller. However, this projection allows for simple visualization and navigation, as it keeps directions accurate, albeit at the expense of distance, area, and shape. He published a map of the world in 1569 based on this projection, and many other map projections were soon developed. The modern atlas. As a result of countless explorations, the modern atlas was developed. An atlas is a book containing maps of the world, named after the giant in Greek mythology who held the world on his shoulders. Geography as we know it today centers around the use of an atlas. The Greeks invented the Astrolabe in the 2nd century BC. It is a flat metal ring marked off in degrees with a rotating bar in the center. It was used to measure the altitude of stars, planets, and the sun. From these measurements, it was possible to establish latitude. Astrolabes were used until the 1500s when the cross staff came into use. Like an astrolabe, the cross staff measured altitude by looking at the sun and establishing latitude. Navigators preferred using a cross staff because it was much easier to use on a rolling ship. Although it was easier to use, it became very unpopular after many navigators became blind from staring at the sun for too long. In 1757, a new tool called a sextant was introduced. The sextant derived its name from the fact that it could measure up to 60 degrees. The sextant became very popular and is still used today. A magnetic needle mounted on what is known as a compass rose. Because of the Earth's magnetic fields, the compass always points north, aiding explorers in navigation, considered the greatest invention in the world of exploration. The birth of modern mapmaking and surveying. The refinement of surveying techniques in France in the late 1700s greatly improved the art of mapmaking. By measuring angles and distances between various points, surveyors can plot a picture on the part of the Earth they are studying. They can learn its shape, size, and position. Based on the new art of surveying, an accurate map of the planet was finally developed in 1791. Surveying has led to many new types of maps over time. Accurate maps of cities, accurate maps of roads, accurate maps for traveling the ocean, even the air, such as aeronautical mapping. Alfred Wegener used mapping to postulate his theory of continental drift in the early 1900s. Similar plant and animal fossils are found around different continent shores, suggesting that they were once joined. Wegener's idea was ridiculed by the majority of the scientific community, but he has since been proved correct. Geographic Information Systems. The Canada Geographic Information System, CGIS, created in 1962, was the first GIS and was used to store, analyze, and manipulate data collected for the Canada Land Inventory. The biggest revolution in map-making occurred in the 1970s with the development of Geographic Information Systems, or GIS. These used all the information held about a given area, and in 1973, the first computerized large-scale digitized maps appeared in the UK. Complete digitization of the country was achieved in 1995. By the early 1980s, commercial vendors of GIS software emerged, combining the first-generation approach to separation of spatial and attribute information with a second-generation approach to organizing attribute data into database structures. By the end of the 20th century, platforms and users were beginning to export the concept of viewing GIS data over the internet. 2005 and 2006. Google Earth, the first version of Google Earth, was released. Terrain and buildings could be viewed three-dimensionally. This virtual globe needs special software and doesn't run in a web browser. In traditional paper map making, the map is both the database and the display of geographic information. By contrast, a GIS includes computer software, hardware, digital data, storage, analysis, and displays huge amounts of information. It provides the potential for producing information on a map base for very specific purposes, and it allows more detailed analysis of the spatial patterns of the Earth than ever before. The sky is no longer the limit for mapmakers, as satellites orbiting other celestial bodies now send data back to Earth, which can create detailed landform maps and images of planets and moons we are unlikely to see in such detail for real. The future of mapmaking. Sonar. A new device known as sonar was invented during World War II. Sonar involves the use of sound waves to detect objects. A sound wave is sent to an object, and the time it takes to return determines distance. In relation to sonar, we are talking about water depth. Many consider the ocean to be the last great frontier. The use of sonar has led to very accurate maps of our oceans and waterways. Satellites. The first satellite was launched into space in 1957 by the former Soviet Union. In the 55 years since the first satellite was launched, we have gathered as much information as possible from many satellites circling the Earth. Satellites can carry various types of data gathering equipment, such as sonar, thermometers, radar, and cameras. Remote sensing provides spatial data, and GIS helps creating maps which is in a digital format. These soft maps will be immensely useful. These maps can be upgraded, shared, and manipulated and analyzed as per the user's requirement.